Today I would like to consider another movie in the genre of the off-the-grid type of movie. The movie that portrays life as lived by a person or a group of people who opt to say no to modern life, who opt to say no to the surveillance state, or the various aspects of the surveillance state that keep us under the eye of Sauron, I guess you could say, even though I'm not a Lord of the Rings guy. But where we're always being watched, where Big Brother always has his eye on us. That is the grid. And last time I talked about a movie that was more recently released and hasn't really gotten a whole lot of fanfare, called Land, which I still do recommend. I still think it's worth watching, especially if you're interested in this whole notion of living off the grid. Today I'm going to talk about a movie that is much more well known, and it's called The Village, and it's a film by M. Night Shyamalan. Now, first things first, I'm very much a fan of M. Night Shyamalan. I'm well aware he's taken a lot of knocks from a lot of people who think he's a hack, or who think he's gimmicky, or this, that, or the other thing. I will admit that he had a couple of movies that weren't up to snuff, but for my money, I will take the M. Night canon and put it right up there among, the canon of some of the best working auteurs today. I will also say about Shyamalan, and this is something that I have written about a couple of times, and I will see if I can link to the articles that I wrote about him. The earliest piece that I ever wrote for AlternativeRight.com in its in its earliest format, back when alt-right was not synonymous with all things evil. This was back in 2010 when Richard Spencer was first starting up his AlternativeRight.com page. The first article that I submitted that ended up getting published went under the title, the sort of cheeky title, Hollywood's Last White Nationalist. Now, I didn't choose that title for the article. I thought it was funny, but I didn't choose it, and I don't think it wasn't meant to suggest that Shyamalan was a white nationalist. But what I did point out in that article is that he is very much someone who seems to appreciate what we could call the white aesthetic. And he's a non-white himself. He's an Indian American, I think. Maybe he was born first in India and then came here from an early age, but thoroughly Americanized. Sounds American when you hear him speak. But you can see in his movies there's this kind of appreciation for, again, white aesthetics. And I'll let you, if you're interested, you could read that article. I won't go on too much about that right now. But in another piece that I wrote a little bit earlier than that, I wrote this was something that I wrote initially for The Last Ditch, and then it got republished at AlternativeRight.com, and I think it's still available. I'll go and again, I will post it below if I can find it. But it went under the title, Maybe It Does Take a Village. And that was a reference to what was then, sort of in the current vernacular, the Hillary Clinton book, It Takes a Village to Raise a Child, the notorious Hillary Clinton, and that notorious title of hers. So in that article, I write a bit about this movie, but I just want to say, first of all, some general thoughts about Shyamalan. I truly, deeply feel, based on what I've seen of his films, based on the themes that he tends to keep coming back to over and over and over again. I feel like he's on the side of the angels. I feel like he is someone who believes in the power of innocence. He's someone who believes in spirituality. He's someone who opposes. I think it can be easily seen. You don't even have to look that hard. That he opposes most of the pernicious trends of today. He is a humanitarian or a humanist filmmaker in the best possible sense, in the sense that he wants what is good for humanity. He's a believer in, again, spiritualism, human potential. He promotes mysticism. He promotes mystery. He enjoys. He also enjoys ambiguities in ways that a lot of in our very very self-righteous and very punitive age, there's a tendency to just come down hard on wrong thinkers. Shyamalan doesn't tend to do that. He, particularly in a movie like The Village, which is complex in what it sets up and how it presents the story to the viewer and how it presents the situation faced by the characters to the viewer. He is not. He's not interested in castigating one side or the other. He understands the purpose behind the creation of the village, while he also pulls back the veil on the myth that's being promoted to keep the village going. I'm going to probably give a little bit away here if you haven't seen The Village, but heck, it's almost 20 years old now, so if you haven't seen it, I'd highly recommend watching it. It's one of my favorite movies. It's definitely my favorite movie of Shyamalan's, and it's one of my favorite movies just altogether. It's probably in my top 10, maybe even in my top 5. Top 10. I'll just be on the safe side. It's top 10, definitely in there somewhere. So what is it about? The movie The Village appears at first to be set in the 19th century. I think there's even a date that we see early on a gravestone, which is something like 1890, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's set among a group of people who are living together in what looks like this intentional community, similar to a lot of the sort of experimental communities that were attempted during that time period. This utopian notion of let's break away from society and all of its ills, and let's start all over from scratch and create this community which has all of the positive things about a community that has been lost due to all of the corruption within the wider society. So at first it seems that this is, that you kind of get Nathaniel Hawthorne vibes off of this this village, and the people even speak in this stilted way, which sounds like old school English, and it has this, again, all of Shyamalan's films are very atmospheric, and this promotes this atmosphere of again this feeling of remoteness and this feeling of of being in the past. And there's the costumes, and then there's the dialogue, and you are really immersed in what seems to be this older time. But you still have the theme of the off-the-grid theme, even though the 19th century grid wasn't nearly as tightly woven around us all as the 21st century grid is. You still have people wanting to get away, seeing great evil around them and wanting to get away. And then we find out, without going into too much detail, that there is a myth that is being promoted to keep the villagers in line, to keep them from being too curious, especially the younger ones who have never seen anything else but the village. It's something that there's a suggestion that if one wanders beyond the borders of the village, that these monsters will come. And it turns out that these monsters are not real, that they're costumes that the village elders wear at various times, just to keep up this charade, this what John Hurt's character calls a farce, even at one point. So the interesting thing about how this is shown is I don't think the village elders are ever shown to be the bad guys. We see that they have this way of this manner of deception that they're using, and this type of manipulation that they are using, and that's certainly not a great thing that they're doing that. But we also see their motivation for it, and eventually it gets revealed. Again, I'm skipping over a lot of major details because so that if you see it, there's still a lot of stuff that'll be new to you. If you see it after watching this review all the way through, I mean. But it is eventually revealed that this village is not a 19th century village. This is a village that was set up in modern day times, and i.e. the present. And the people who started who spearheaded this entire project were people who lived in the city and who saw chaos, corruption, and violent crime. Now, here's where the film gets interestingly, ideologically dicey in some ways. And this was part of what I talked about in my article. All of the villagers are white, and a lot of what's talked about has to do with crime in a urban setting. And so, you can put two and two together and see this whole village as like an extreme form of white flight. Now, do I think that Shyamalan is a racialist? Do I think he is someone who is promoting, the notion of racialism, or that he's a white nationalist in some way? Like the kind of facetious title that Richard Spencer used for my article would suggest. No, I don't believe that. But I do think that he is sympathetic to certain people, certain demographics, that it's not kosher to be sympathetic to. But he does it in a way that's subtle and underhanded and clever. So I don't know. I don't think he's ever gotten called on it, although I think, I believe that the reason why some of the critics hate him so much has to do partly with what they sense about him, and what they sense about his entire way of viewing the world, that it's very much not theirs. As I was saying a few minutes ago, that he's on the side of the angels, and most modern critics, it would be on the side of the devils. So ultimately, what we find out about the village is that, and what makes it even more interesting is there's sort of a throwaway line at some point where somebody, I think there's a character who actually is played by Shyamalan in a brief cameo. He's not in the village, he's somebody outside the village. Everybody in the village is white, as I said a few minutes ago. But he makes this observation that this land was purchased by some billionaire, and the land where the village is set, and that they're so powerful that they have paid for planes never to fly over the village, so that this whole sense of being in the past gets maintained, and so that there's not a, hey, look up in the sky, what's that thing? And again, all this is being done supposedly to protect the villagers, and particularly the children being raised in the village, from the pernicious outside influences, which is very much, what I think off-the-grid thinkers, it's very consonant with what most off-the-grid thinkers would be viewing things, that they want their children to be protected, not just physically protected, but protected from bad ideas and corruption generally. So, all in all, I would say the village, it ultimately it gives you space to meditate upon what it's presenting, and it doesn't force you into thinking one way or the other, thinking that it's good or that it's all good or that it's all bad. But I do believe that it does promote this notion that that there's something to be said for the village. In one particularly emotional scene, John Hurt's character, the sort of the head of the village elders, talks about innocence. And so he says very pointedly, what we have created here is innocence, and I'm not ready to give that up. I do not want that to be betrayed. And another character talks about love, and the importance of shielding and promoting love, and that love in its pure form, the world bows down before it in awe. Just these wonderful lines of dialogue that come up and that are related to the story, by the way. I haven't talked much about the story, about what happens in the story, but this whole notion about protection of innocence, the promotion of love in its purest form, the notion of wanting to fight and to purify oneself and one's own from evil and the evil and corruption of the world. But how far do you go? How far is too far to protect your own family? Well, these people have been through a lot. That we hear their stories. We hear about what's happened to them, the kind of things they've experienced out in the world, and we understand why they've chosen this radical posture that they've chosen, why they have opted to live off the grid to the extent that they have. So I'll wrap it up there. This is again a very famous, maybe the highest profile off the grid movie that I can think of right now, although there are others. And sometime soon I want to talk about The Mosquito Coast, which came out in the 1980s. Very intriguing film, also about a family who wants to live off the grid. In that case, it doesn't go quite so well, but there's still some, I think, nobility in the effort of it, even though the guy who's behind it all is a madman, ultimately. Here, though, in The Village, it's not presented as madness, not at all, not in the least. And that, again, is why what I like and admire about Shyamalan, in addition to him, being a very skilled filmmaker, is the fact that he seems to find these matters to be worth presenting, worth talking about, and that he doesn't just look for a cardboard villain of racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic people, the way that we're mostly being brainwashed into doing these days, in this very ideologically claustrophobic way, increasingly so. Anyway, those are my thoughts on M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. Let me know what you think if you've seen it, and I'll talk to y'all soon. My name's Andy Nowicki. Check out my work at altrightnovelist.com.